Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Taco Society Presents. I'm here with Sydney Lee, Phil Perrone, and we're back after I did a little bit of a remote. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but it's nice to be back. Let's see what's new with you guys. Sydney, we'll start with you. What's up?
Well, I this month have an anthology coming out with a short. Actually, it's a 100-word piece of mine called "In the Garden of Wooden Weevil."
Congrats!
Yeah, thank
great.
you. It's the next volume of 22 Quick Shivers, and I'm excited about that. And I also just had a short story called "Little Fugue," published in the Demonic Visions Book 6, which is a great series edited by Chris Robertson, and there are 50 tales in that anthology. So a lot of great stories.
Is that poetry, flash fiction?
It's short stories.
Okay.
Some of them are flash, but just pretty short stories.
What's yours? How long is yours?
Mine is Little Fugue. Let's see, it's probably 3,800 words.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually the sequel to Night Soliloquy, which was my story in the Library of the Dead. I wrote it before I wrote Night Soliloquy. For some reason, when I came up with the idea for the story for that, this idea, this concept came into my mind, and I had to write that out first in order to get to know the characters and the history. So I wrote the sequel, and and it just got published in that. And I had to cancel my trip to LA. I wasn't well enough to go. I was going to work on that exciting project, which I haven't been able to announce yet, but I am working on it now, so it's in motion, and I'll be going out to LA in April, hopefully, if I'm well enough, and getting it, more in gear. And the best news is Gus. He is my 10-week-old border collie who came from Wyoming and is just the most beautiful.
I've seen the pictures, yeah.
He
is cute.
God, he is the most beautiful thing, and he's hilarious. He and Holden adore each other, and he's the opposite of Holden. Holden is very passive and quiet. Gus is like a hellion.
Now, Holden's your husband?
No.
No, okay. Holden's your other dog.
Holden is my 10-year-old boarder.
Mm-hmm.
And Gus talks and is very vocal and terrorizes Holden in a fun way. And it's just every day is.
How's Anthony liking the dog?
He is smitten. Smitten isn't a strong enough word.
Good for him. Good.
So yeah,
Great.
And Ian, my son, is madly in love.
Great.
So it's nice to see. Yeah.
You got some other big news too.
Yeah. The final ballot came out for the Stokers, and I wanted to just congratulate some friends of mine. J.G. Faraday. He was nominated for The Cure in the novel category, and Patrick Freewald for Black Tide. John McElveen was nominated for Hannah Ware.
Good friend of the show.
Yep, in first novel. And in long fiction, I mean, this was the whole, in short fiction and long fiction, I think everybody is fantastic. But Gary Braunbeck and Norman Partridge in long fiction was actually nominated for the short story that he wrote at the beginning of the Library of the Dead. And the big news is that the Library of the Dead was nominated in the anthology category. And the other news is that Naughty Ladies, which I edited by Marge Simon, was nominated in the poetry category, which means that I am now not just a Bram Stoker nominated author, but a Bram Stoker nominated editor too.
Good for
which
you.
is pretty nice. So
That's by our friend Sandy DeLuca.
yeah, she did the artwork in here,
Mhm.
and I think you bought this, right?
I don't have that one. I've got 3 or 4 other ones of hers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you should check this out. I did the layout also, and it's really cool. And I love how Marge is inspired by Sandy's artwork, and the poetry
Oh,
is
They're a great team.
Yeah.
I love Sandy. to
yeah.
death.
And I did the cover too. So so congratulations to everybody, and it's talking about movies. The screenplay. I don't know if you saw What We Do in the Shadows.
I have, yes.
But I thought that was brilliant, and
Well,
I'm rooting for that.
Speaking
that's
of movies,
that's a New Zealand horror comedy.
Oh, I loved that. So
speaking of movies, Sydney got on Facebook and she told everybody, you've got to see this movie called Contracted 2.
no,
Was it not Contracted? What the heck was it? Now I'm going to blow
no,
this.
The Witch.
No. It was part 2 of the series. It was
Oh, I didn't say see it. I just said it. I was making a play on words. It was Contracted Part 2, and I said Contracted Part Ooh,
Yeah.
because it was so
Gory.
disgusting. Did you see it?
I've seen the first one.
I saw
and
the
it was-
first
it was
one.
pretty-
The second one
yeah.
upped the ooh factor.
Well, because
so.
of you, I did watch the first one.
Oh.
And I couldn't believe what I was watching.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then I got about maybe 20, 25 minutes into the second one, and I said, it couldn't compare to I thought the first one was much better.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I
yeah.
kind of
yeah.
switched the channel.
Yeah, no, I didn't say you've got to see it. That's not a movie I would
Okay, so
recommend.
from now on, I can trust your recommendations.
The Witch,
Okay,
you have
that's
to
to go
see.
see. Okay.
Oh
That's
my
at the
God.
theaters now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we got to
Very
move
nice.
along here. So
Yes, okay.
I'd
Who's
love to talk
next?
movies all night.
I know. All right. Who's
Phil,
next?
you got some
All right.
news.
Yes. Well, if you want to talk movies, Dark Discussions podcast, which I do.
Yeah, no,
on
go
that.
ahead. Yeah.
But besides that, I just have one quick thing. There's an anthology I mentioned I was in a few months ago that's coming out. Cadence of Decay, it's called, and it is coming out. There's an official date for the Halloween of this year. Yeah,
Excellent.
so that's exciting.
Good for you.
Edited by Ty Schwamberger. I'm sure.
He's great.
Yeah, he is.
He
a
wrote
good guy.
Dining, which is quite the.
Yeah, you read
quite the
that. You
novel.
said-
Yeah,
Yeah, you
you
said it
really,
before.
you
Yeah.
really.
Well, it's extreme.
Yeah.
So you got to be prepared for the ending, but it was worth reading if you like that kind of
Of
horror.
course. Yeah. No, but though he writes, I guess what you call extreme. My story in the book is not extreme at all. It's basically 2 people sitting in front of a fireplace at like 3 in the morning and just talking.
I've read it,
and,
yeah.
and that's it. Yeah. And it's
I
called
like it.
The Everyday Struggle of Being is the title. So
Oh, so
Yeah.
Cadence of Decay is the anthology?
yes.
Oh.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's basically the theme is basically communication devices have to be part of it, and
Oh,
my
that's
story
right,
starts and
that's
ends
right.
with a home telephone. So, yep.
Well, I got invited to an anthology too. I never accept invites for anthologies.
Why?
2 reasons. One, I don't like the pressure. I don't like deadlines. I'm terrible with deadlines. And secondly, I don't like to be told what to write. Usually anthologies, when they invite you, they have a theme.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time coming up with a theme that speaks to me. You know, I mean,
Or at least at that moment, right?
at least at that moment. But
Yeah.
this time a good friend called and said, hey, I've got this anthology. It's an extreme anthology. And I'd like you to write a story for it, even though you don't write extreme horror. So I'm going to try it. I'm going to
Good.
try it. I'm about
Good.
3/4 of the way through. I'm making myself sick writing this thing. I mean, it's
Oh.
really for me, it's extreme.
Yeah.
You know, somebody else may look at it and go, you know, I'd rather read about two people sitting in front of a fireplace, you know?
So does it just have to be extreme, or is there?
Oh, no, there's a theme.
Okay, there's
a
another
theme.
theme.
It's a very loose theme, but
Okay.
it's there. I can do what I want with the theme, but it has to follow a certain plot point. So, but it's the first time I've ever done this.
It's good practice. It's good.
It is.
It's a good exercise.
It's it's very daunting, only because I don't normally write these things. So we'll see how it turns out. I mean, I may write it, he may get it and say, nope, too tame, you know, and that's fine. I'll use it somewhere else. But I'm just I'm excited and I'm hesitant at the same time. So we'll see. And the only other news I have is, as you know, we went to Virginia for the Taco Society. We did a remote shoot, and we got 3 episodes from that.
Cool.
Yeah, hopefully you guys will, you guys in TV land, will watch those episodes, because they were a lot of fun to do. I drove 11 hours up, 11 hours back, so I put my time in for it. Yeah.
I like that drive, though.
Well, I didn't go down 95. I went through, I think it's 81 and 84 down. So I missed all the tolls. And missed all
but
the
that's the, isn't that along the, sort of through the woods along the...
It's all woods.
Yeah.
It's all woods.
I love that drive.
I love
took
that better than going through all the
I took
cities.
that back from Indiana.
Yeah.
I have to disagree. I like both because those cities you don't get to see every day because we don't live near them. It is kind of cool to drive by.
But when you've seen
Yeah.
them 100 times, you
Yeah,
know, I mean, I've been through Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. Not that I went to Pittsburgh, but New York City. You know,
Baltimore,
it just,
whatever.
yeah, Baltimore. I've seen them so many times. DC. It's time for me to try something else.
Right. So did you go through like West Virginia and things like that?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
Maryland,
cool.
West
Yeah,
Virginia.
That's great. That's good. That is
Yeah.
good then. Yeah. Very good.
Well, we're here. This show, I should say, is going to focus on Women in Horror. It is Women in Horror Month. And Phil, you've got an intro.
Yes, I do. But I would like to say that it's a month, also Black Heritage Month and a number of other things. But I think Women in Horror should be every month, not just
I agree.
for
Yeah.
one month.
There's a lot of politics involved,
Yeah.
whether there should be a Woman in Horror Month or
Right,
not.
right.
Yeah.
We're not going to discuss that. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not for us.
Oh, I didn't mean it that way. I just mean all 12 months are Women in Horror Month because they release books every day. A woman every week. There's new releases by women authors and.
Well, we're going to talk about some of them
Yes,
tonight.
let's do it.
yeah.
Let's do it. All right. So what we talk about? I just want to do a quick intro of women in horror writing generally.
Sure.
And basically, horror writing started with a man named Horace Walpole, who wrote a book called The Castle on Otranto, which is very gothic, and yet what he started is where women in horror start, because at that time, which was the late 1700s, 2 authors, Clara Reeve and Anne Radcliffe, came around, and they literally jumped on his idea of the Gothic novel, which is the basis of horror. And folks like Bram Stoker, Edgar Allan Poe, and so forth, all write Gothic horror. And these folks started it, and 2 of them that really brought it forward were women, Clara Reeve and Anne Radcliffe. And what Gothic is the things that we think of from Universal horror movies, such as the windy tunnel with a flickering candle, hidden passages, things of that
Everything's
nature.
black and white.
Yeah, no, but the mist and the
Yes.
falling the walls of the castle, things like that, and that's where horror started, and women most certainly had a big thing in that. Then through the years, the Gothic novel expanded. The Bronte sisters wrote Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights and things like that, and though they're not horror, they have that element. Other folks, Daphne du Maurier, who wrote Rebecca, which became an Alfred Hitchcock movie, won the Academy Award. Laurence Olivier starred in it. And so women have been major influences in the horror genre for years, since the very beginning, with like I said, with Clara Reeve and Anne Radcliffe. But then, of course, during the years, we've had numerous others like Shirley Jackson, Joyce Carol Oates,
Love them both.
and of course probably the most famous, at least in our
Mary
era.
Shelley.
Well, that's of course, yes. That's, she came in 18. I got it here, 1818. Mary Shelley did Frankenstein, and people don't know that. A lot of people who say, think of the horror monsters. Who would have thought Frankenstein? My mother, when I told her that, she was shocked. She had no idea, and my mother's well read too, and so it's amazing. One of the biggest icons in history was by a woman in a time where women weren't supposed to write, never mind write that type of fiction. But in this century, right now, folks know most popular would be probably Anne Rice, obviously, with her vampire tales. But I just wanted to bring that up because women have been there at the beginning, starting with Clara Reeve and Anne Radcliffe. And I just wanted to.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So.
Well, I just had a brand new baby grandchild, a daughter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm
And the
very,
name? What the folks'
her name's Aniston.
very good.
Aniston.
Very cute.
Yeah, and what I'm hoping that she becomes a future woman in horror. So we're going to train her early, get her into it.
Yes, absolutely.
We're going to each talk about a woman. Depending on the time, we're going to do at least 6. Each one of us are going to highlight 2 women. If we do have more time, we'll expand that to 9.
Right.
But we are running a little low, so I'm going to get going on it now, if you guys don't mind.
Yeah,
Not
go
at
right
all.
ahead, Tony, yeah.
Okay. The first person I want to talk about, first woman, is Kristin Dearborn. If it screams, squelches, or bleeds, Kristin Dearborn has probably written about it. She revels in comments like, "But you look so normal. How did you come up with that?" You've probably heard that 100 times. She's a lifelong New Englander, and she aspires to the footsteps of the local masters, King and Lovecraft. When not writing or rotting her brain with cheesy horror flicks, you could probably relate to that, preferably creature features, she can be found scaling rock cliffs or zipping around Vermont on a motorcycle or just traveling around the globe. So I know Kristin from, Kristin, I keep saying Kristin, but Kristin, from the conventions. She's a member of the New England Horror Writers group, and I see her a lot. And I'm going to be doing a convention with her. I think it's just her, myself, and one other person, John Daly, I think, in August. So that should be a chance to get to know her a little bit more, personally know her a
Nice.
little bit more.
I've never met her.
Oh, she's a great kid, she's a great woman, I'm sorry.
Now that you're a grandfather,
I know,
you're
everybody's
gonna
a
call
kid
everybody
to me.
kid.
Her newest book is The Woman in White, and I'll just read you a little bit of a...
Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah.
The advanced buzz on that is really good. And I like the description of it so much, I just wanted to read it here before I get into her work. As a fierce snowstorm descends on Rocky Road, Maine, a good Samaritan stops to help a catatonic woman sitting in the middle of an icy road, and is never seen or heard from again. When the police find his car, it is splattered in more blood than a human body can hold. While the storm rages on, the waves of disappearances continue, the victims sharing only one commonality: they are all male. It's up to 3 young women to figure out who or what is responsible: a forensic scientist, a waitress struggling with an abusive boyfriend, and a gamer coping with the loss of her lover. Their search will lead them on a journey filled with unspeakable horrors, all connected to a mysterious woman in white. I'm going to purchase it, but something about a snowstorm, about snow, about winter, just gets to me all the time.
Of course,
Yeah.
And this just sounds very, very interesting. I'm going to read from Wicked Tales with Kristin has got a story in. I know I'm going to
Oh, you know what? I
catching
did
myself.
meet her at Anthocon.
She goes to Anthocon, yeah.
And I heard her read, I think, when everybody read from that book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Now that she's
that you
very,
remember.
very pretty.
Yeah, she is pretty,
Yeah,
yes.
very pretty.
And she's a great writer,
Yeah.
and she's fun to hang around.
Yeah.
So this is called Somebody's Darling, and I'm going to read just a small paragraph to give you a little bit of background on what the story is about and explain the title, and then I'm going to read a page from the story itself. This is Somebody's Darling by Kristin Dearborn. No one knew what started it, but the dead from this war between brothers didn't stay dead. People blamed voodoo from Africa, Appalachian curses, but no one knew how it began. Once they passed, the dead from this war rose, and each one of them had been somebody's darling. Fire stopped them, as did a bullet in the brain or cutting off the head. And that's what they'd done in mass quantities, excuse me, until Thomas Holmes' embalming fluid began keeping men dead. That was a little preface. I'm going to head to the story now. Excuse me. All they had in this world was each other, but she wouldn't have them long. She'd been nursing soldiers for almost a year now, and she recognized the glassiness around the eyes, the stink of the blood and dirt, gunpowder and sick. His breath stank, indicating internal bleeding. He must be in great pain. She wished morphine for him, but knew they wouldn't spare it on a man who was so obviously dying. "Father," she said, taking his hand. His hands had always been dry and strong. Now they felt clammy and cold, like a fish that's come out of the river and lost the strength to fight. This couldn't be him. Couldn't be the man who raised her. "Father?" He moved his eyes towards her with a whimper. Her father couldn't make that sound. If this really wasn't him, then she could use Dr. Holmes' fluid on him, and he would be at peace. He railed against it. They pumped cadavers full of poison for medical students to dissect. He shouted upon learning Jacob had been embalmed. The body, he reasoned, was nothing but a vessel to carry our everlasting souls. Preserving the corpse was an unnatural fascination with the body. Good Christians focused on the soul. It wasn't so simple here. If not embalmed, the dead would rise. Her father, who had been here, who'd fought in the war, might prefer to be shot down, to be burned in a mass grave. But he wasn't anyone's darling. No one's darling but hers. "Don't let them." Father dissolved into a fit of coughing. Isabella mentally finished the sentence for him. "Don't let them turn me into one of those things." But next, a bit of fresh, bright blood on his lips, he said, "I want to die natural." She felt her heart break. She looked to Burr, but he hung back at the door. When she sought his eyes, he looked down to the rough-hewn floor. "Father, you'll be gone, your soul gone to heaven. Let us take care of your body here." "Never," he said, sounding clear, and not at all like a dying man. His eyes slid closed then, and he stopped breathing. "Father?" She knew indisputably what a dead man looked like. But her father? He wasn't a dead man. He was her father. The two couldn't be the same. She shook him, hoping to bring light back into his eyes, but his head merely lolled from side to side. Their last exchange had been stolen by this blight. No talk of love, just an argument about what his physical condition would be. She wrapped her arms around herself. Isn't that a great little section?
Wow.
I mean, it really it reminds me of a story I wrote that was fairly similar. It's all emotion. You know, it's not blood, it's not gore, it's not visceral.
Mm-hmm.
It's all emotion, and I really enjoy that.
So what else has she written?
Tell you right now. She's written Sacrifice Island, which is a novella, Trinity, which is a novel,
Wow.
Spider Cheese, which is a short story. That's available wherever ebooks are sold. Stolen Away, which is a novel to be released this June by Raw Dog Screaming Press.
Oh, nice.
She's had stories in Dark Moon Digest, Midnight Echo, Grim Corpse,
Wow.
and other anthologies, including Wicked Tales.
Wow, impressive.
Yeah, her characters are strong. They're deep. She does such a great job making them seem like flesh and blood. I everything I've read by her, I've enjoyed, and I hope you enjoyed that little snippet. And if you want to read more of the tale, pick up Wicked Tales.
Nice.
You got something now.
Yes, I wanted to talk about Rose Blackthorn, who
Great
is
author.
she
Yeah.
is fabulous. She is prolific. She just is always having something published. I can't keep up with her. She writes short stories, flash fiction, drabble, poetry. She is in so many publications. She writes speculative fiction from the high mountain desert of eastern Utah. She's got 2 beautiful dogs and a magnificent boyfriend. She's a wonderful person. If I listed all of her publications, we'd be here all day. But she's had poetry in the HWA Horror Poetry Showcase, Widowmakers. She has her own collection, Thorns, Hearts, and Thistles, which is beautiful. She has short fiction in Eulogies too, and she's had stuff published by Sekhmet Press and Siren's Call, Buzzy Mag, just so many different things. She's always working, always having something published.
Her story in Eulogies too was so good that we left it. We made it the last story.
Wow,
Yeah.
the anchor tale,
Yeah.
nice, yeah.
And we're very impressed with her.
She has a way with words. She is very good at creating visuals with her words, and she's delicate. Her writing is delicate but strong at the same time. If you know what I mean.
You got something to read?
Yes,
Good.
I wanted to just read a passage from her story in Equilibrium Overturned, which was published by Gray Matter Press, who I love. Anthony Rivera and Sharon Lawson are the editors, and this is Through the Ghostlands, and I just lost my page for where I was going to read from, but I think I'll be able to find it. Oh, here it is. And there was so much talk about this story after the book was published. I think they're still talking about it. So it's definitely, a special story, and I love it. I've read it a couple times. In the morning, the wind had stilled. Darrell left the two women to make breakfast and another pot of coffee while he climbed the dune alone. He would have liked to have Brooklyn with him, but she had just shaken her head at his invitation and turned back to the fire. London opted to stay with her sister, and that was fine with him. As he climbed the steep pile of sliding sand, he thought about the women. He loved Brooklyn and had from the first moment he saw her, regardless of what anyone might believe about love at first sight. She was lovely and sweet-tempered, with an infectious laugh and a smile that could light up the gloomiest day. She could also be melancholy and had mourned deeply the deaths of her friends and family when the old world ended. Her sister London, her mirror image in all but the shade of her eyes, did not affect him the same way. There had been many people who could not tell the twins apart, but he'd never had any difficulty. London was bright and cheerful, but in a way that seemed superficial. She was always the one to look for a silver lining, to quote some platitude when others were unhappy. To Darrell, where Brooklyn seemed to be so warm and loving, London was a quicksilver false front who only showed people what she wanted them to see. They might be identical twins, but inside he didn't think they could be any more different. When he reached the top of the dune, he stopped to catch his breath. He understood now the desolate look in Brooklyn's eyes when she'd come back from her exploration yesterday. The wind wasn't blowing at the moment, so the stench was a little less pervasive, but the view was heartbreaking. No birds flew anywhere in the expanse of cloud-covered sky. The diffused light was bright enough to see, but not enough to pick sparkles from the restless water. The waves that glided into the shore were lackluster. Even the sound of the surf seemed muted. Darrell noted the carcasses that Brooklyn had mentioned. There weren't even any scavengers working on the corpses. It was as though everything in the world was dead, except for Darrell and his two companions. The Ghostlands was the correct way to refer to this land now, even if the name had come from London. London Bridge is falling down, he sang softly. He would never sing it in front of the women, but the song often floated into his head. He still wondered why their parents had named them the way they did, with the last name Bridges. Brooklyn had told him once that London had been teased with that song all the time they were growing up, but she'd also said their names were better than the sickly, sweet, rhyming names that most twins were given. So where do we go from here? He mused aloud.
Great atmosphere, good book, yeah, a good story rather.
And
Great.
she used the word melancholy.
Yes,
I love that word.
I
Yeah.
love that
That's a
word
great
too.
word.
It's one of my favorite words.
We're going to be back with Phil in just a minute. We're going to take some station identification, and then you're up. We're back. Phil, you're up.
Oh yeah, all right. I wanted to go off the reservation a little bit because I'm going to talk about some of the people in history, like I began the show with. Basically, also I wanted to go off the fact that the Taco Society isn't a show about horror writers; it's a show about speculative fiction writers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the writers that I wanted to talk about tonight was a woman called C.L. Moore. This book here actually has numerous tales of all women writers from the science fiction to the high time when Asimov and Heinlein were around, but there was dozens and dozens of women, and one of them was C.L. Moore. C.L. Moore was an author that actually wrote for numerous same magazines as H.P. Lovecraft back in the day, and she married Henry Kuttner, who was another science fiction author that was quite famous in that time as well. But the main reason I chose her was because she wrote about a woman warrior the same year as Robert Howard wrote about Red Sonja, which everybody knows who Red Sonja is. They made movies. Conan, he was what he wrote, and Schwarzenegger was in a movie with about Red Sonja and such. But she wrote about a woman warrior in 1934, the same year, and this book here is a collection of the tales of that woman warrior, Jarell of Jory. And I figured that since, again, here's a woman, it's not Frankenstein by any means, but she wrote about a warrior woman by a woman almost 100 years ago. And I thought that was the reason why I wanted to choose her. I actually bought this book from a used bookstore online because I like some of her read, like she is an anchor story in this book, and I decided that I wanted to read some of her tales. So I'm just going to read the first page of her most famous story of the Jarell of Jory tales, and it's called Black God's Kiss, and I'll just read the first page of that. They brought in Jory's tall commander, struggling between two men of arms who tightly gripped the ropes which bound their captive's mailed arms. They picked their way between mounds of dead as they crossed the great hall toward the dais where the conqueror sat, and twice they slipped a little in the blood that spattered the flags. When they came to a halt before the mailed figure on the dais, Jory's commander was breathing hard, and the voice that echoed hollowly under the helmet's confines was hoarse with fury and despair. Duelbane, the conqueror, leaned on his mighty sword, hands crossed on its hilt, grinning down from his height upon the furious captive before him. He was a big man, Gualman, and he looked bigger still in his spattered armor. There was blood on his hard, scarred face, and he was grinning a white grin that split his short, curly beard glitteringly. Very splendid and very dangerous he looked, leaning on his great sword and smiling down upon fallen Jory's lord, struggling between the stolid men-at-arms. "Unshell me this lobster," said Gualman in his deep, lazy voice. "We'll see what sort of face the fellow has who gave us such a battle. Off with his helmet yet." But a third man had to come and slash the straps which held the iron helmet on, for the struggles of Jory's commander were too fierce, even with bound arms, for either of the guards to release their hold. There was a moment of sharp struggle, then the straps parted and the helmet rolled loudly across the flagstones. Gualman's white teeth clicked on a startled oath. He stared. Jory's lady glared back at him from between her captives, wild red hair tousled, wild lion yellow eyes ablaze. So
She had red hair too.
yeah, she did, and sure enough, when they take the helmet off, they're completely surprised to find that the
woman.
fierce warrior was a woman.
Wow.
And I noticed that she used her initials rather than her
She
real
did,
name.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, because back even only 100 years ago, or even in the 1940s to 1970s, as this book shows, a woman didn't necessarily get the credit, or people would avoid their books because, oh, it's a woman, they can't write this type of stuff, which of course is a crock. But by using a pen name or initials, as you said, Tony, they
You avoided that.
Exactly.
Yep.
So.
Excuse me. The next person I'm going to discuss that I think deserves a lot of acclaim and notoriety, and she's one of my favorite horror writers is Marianne Halbert. I think you know Marianne.
she's a
Yeah.
great-
Love her.
Fantastic. Absolutely.
She's
As
wonderful.
a human being, never as a writer.
Yes.
Oh, not only as a writer, she's a
she
great person.
is
Fantastic.
incredible.
Marianne,
Nicest
you've got a
person.
fan
Yeah,
club here.
we love you,
We do,
Marianne.
we do.
Well, Marianne's from central Indiana, where she resides with her husband, 2 daughters, and a dog. Marianne has over 20 short stories published and was a panelist at Anthicon 2011 and is working on her first novel. Marianne also spends too much time pondering things that go bump in the night. Growing up in the heartland, she devoured mysteries, horror, and loves to read anything quirky and spooky. She abhors gore for gore's sake. She gets her thrills on creating tension and edge-of-your-seat suspense, the kind that makes you think of her stories long after you finished them. Keep your flashlights handy and keep up with her at halbertfiction.web.com. Some of the anthologies she's in, if you want to look them up: Help Wanted, Tales of Jobs on the Terror; Anthologies Years 1, 2, and 3; Canopic Jars. Did I say that? Canopic or
Yep,
Canopic?
that's right. Yeah, Canopic. Either's good.
Either's good?
Yeah.
I'll have to go back and look because I read that so long ago. And I didn't know her then.
It does make it a little different when you know the
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll
more
have to-
enjoyable.
Yeah.
Bloody Carnival, From Beyond the Grave, and many others. I've known Marianne, you guys know Marianne also, but I've known her for over 5 years. And she's a delightful woman, as we've all talked about. She's funny, knowledgeable, and she really loves writing and anything to do with writing. We're Antho buddies, with both of us appearing in all 3 of the anthology year books, 1, 2, and 3. With Marianne opening one of them with When Betsy Whispers. To open an anthology is just as big an honor, I think, as to anchor one, as you say, to close it off. Her collection, Wake Up and Smell the Creepy, is fantastic. I actually read it in one sitting. I enjoyed it that much.
I'll have to get that.
Oh, some great stories. In fact, I'm going to read.
I actually was able to get mine autographed by her.
Nice.
I'm going to see if mine's autographed now.
Love
there
the
you
There you
go.
go.
Oh, I love the cover.
I'm going to read from a story called Used Infinity. It's about a man who's driving a used Infinity, a car, with a sentient GPS. And the GPS is a woman, and her name is Gabby. The engine sputtered like she was clearing her throat. Please proceed to the highlighted route. He tried to tell himself it was just his imagination, but she sounded sad. The highlighted route ended at the void area. Vinny knew he could have taken Digger's direction and found the highway. And if he was still the guy with the emphasis on bore, and that's exactly what he would have done. But he needed to find out what was happening. Besides, if he took his way instead of Gabby's, he'd have to listen to her commanding him to turn around. And they both know he'd give in. He looked at the avoid area on the screen. As he pulled away from the curb, he realized with some trepidation that the sun was setting behind him. After they'd gotten out of town, he spoke softly. Turn up the heat. Her voice sounded so synthesized. It's fine. It's already at 74, he said. I'm cold, Vincent. Please, turn up the heat. Suddenly he was cold too, and he punched the red arrows repeatedly until the interior heat registered 86 degrees. His teeth were chattering. He turned the blower up higher. He had to be hallucinating. The stress of his divorce, the midlife crisis. For crap's sake, she said his frigging name. Do you want any music, he asked, his voice cracking. Caution, slow down. They're on a back road, a cornfield to one side, woods to the other. Vinny saw no other traffic. He kept going. Vincent, stop, she commanded. Her voice no longer sounded so computerized. He slammed on the brakes and a dog darted out in front of him. It was mangy and whimpering. Vinny was shaking. Please proceed to the highlighted route. Vinny started up again, slowly. Caution, approaching merge point. He didn't see where any traffic could be merging. It was a 2-lane back road. He came over a hill, the kind kids would call a roller coaster. His headlights caught a girl as he crested the rise. Her chocolate brown eyes grew large, and the impact flung her up onto the hood of his car. But she didn't stop. Her head crashed through the windshield. Then he felt the seatbelt catch him. The girl laid with her legs on the hood, her head and torso protruding into the car. She was a mangled mess. A thick trail of blood ran down and a dark rivulet from her scalp. She tried to speak, but her jaw looked dislocated, and nothing came out but a garbled moan. She reached for him. Shaking, Vinny moved to hold her hand, and she vanished.
Oh, God.
So what happened?
Wow.
That's just a little bit of her writing. I can't do her writing justice with my reading, but you should pick this up. It's a great novel. There's some wonderful tales in here. I tried to highlight one that was a little scary, but she's got other ones in here that'll make you smile.
It's actually a collection.
It's a collection story.
When was that published?
2 years ago, I think.
Actually, it may have been even earlier than it was. I think
2012.
Yeah,
4 years.
It was the year after the first Anthem when you
Yeah.
first met her and I first met her.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact. Yeah.
Oh, we met at the same time.
We met at the same time. Yeah.
Oh.
And then the next year she brought that book.
Oh, jeez.
Yep. And I was able to get a copy autographed. Yep.
So what do you got next?
I wanted to talk about Morgan Griffith, who is actually, she sort of is a little bit, not secretive, but she doesn't promote her work very much. And, you know, she doesn't, she's not very, she's not in the public eye, and so nobody knows too much about her. That is her pen name, Morgan Griffith, and I know her real name, and she and I talk a lot, and she is a sweet, generous, very kind person. She has sent me things. She's extremely talented in writing. Her strong point is short fiction, very short fiction, and she's also an incredible artist. But she actually had a lot of art and poetry published in the 80s and 90s in Eldritch Tales, Fantasy Macabre, and Gru. So now she's sort of revisiting the dark fantasy genre with fiction, and she lives in Central Florida with her pet rats, which is so cool. And I got to name one of them.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah, I named him Silas.
Ah.
He's adorable. But she sent me a card with artwork on it that I framed at home. It's beautiful.
Nice.
She's wonderful.
You got something to read for us?
Yes, I have a flash fiction piece of hers. She's got a lot of work published in some really stellar publications, but this is a flash fiction piece in Creeps the Night, and it is called Hellaway Bridge. So,
Go ahead. Yeah.
okay. Nate saw it first. He was drumming his fingers along the Mustang's dashboard to the bass line of the Cure's Burn. As he glanced out his window, a mammoth shadow loomed in the dark. The wan sliver of moon overhead was little more than a nightlight, and there were few visible stars. Dropping his beat, he leaned forward as Kevin downed the last of his soda. "What is that?" Kev eased down on the brake as they approached a forked road. He let the car idle as he looked past Nate to scan the darkness. "Oh, that's Hellaway Bridge." His voice shared obvious disinterest. "Hellaway?" As in, yeah, keep the hell away, Kevin explained. "Been called that as long as I can remember. Real name is Shrike Woodpass. Super old. Named after the bird and woods around here. A footpath bridge. not wide enough to fit a car, built before the road went in so people could cross the stream back in the day. Looks older than dirt. Supposed to be haunted, Kev added, and regretted it instantly. Nate was undeniable, hyper and awkward as a Great Dane puppy in the front seat. They could see the movie another night, but Kevin wasn't even sure the flashlight in his trunk had working batteries. Just aim the headlights in and we'll be fine. Pulling the car in as close as he could, Kev set the brake but left the engine running. The Mustang smelled like fries. Balling up the fast food sacks, he tossed the trash in a thicket of weeds outside his window. Darkness was even deeper than it seemed from inside the car as they stepped out. This was the outskirts of town, an old back road seldom used except by younger drivers to reach Dansby, the closest town. The road and surrounding area were let go to seed, with massive Spanish moss draped oaks crowding the skyline. No street or city lights could be seen from here. The Mustang's headlights barely cut through the black night. Low-flying fog gave them a misting glow. Clusters of tiny gnats swarmed back and forth through the beams. Framed in that circular aurora, the covered bridge pulsed with interior shadows. The entrance was a mouth of darkness, impenetrable by the car. Spidery vines and cracking arms of vegetation hung down from the roof. It smelled of dampness and mold and an odd mixture of briny water with decomposition. Using flashlight apps, they held up their smartphones. Wait! Nate aimed his light higher toward the top of the structure. Is that a dog? For an instant, they both glimpsed the black and white patches of a spaniel. It made no sound, but before either could voice a word, the dog leapt far out into empty space. It plummeted down. All they could do was watch in what seemed painfully distorted time. It vanished into darkness. They heard no sound of it striking earth. Nate's heart was thundering as he ran to the spot. He was sure the height was too great for the dog to survive. Sweeping their phone lights over, they found nothing.
No.
What the heck? Kevin's eyes ached as he caught Nate's glance. What's the story here? Why is this place haunted? Kev flashed his light at the bridge again. No one knows. There's no tidy story. Not like a kid died here and a ghost attached to the place. I asked Professor Randolph about it once. He said some places are just that way. Sometimes there's no science yet discovered to explain it. They exhibit evil or unnatural tendencies. Frequent accidents happen there, or locations simply give off bad vibes. You've heard the stories about people disappearing and never found. It happens. I never had reason to come out this way when I was younger, but I heard stories about it being pretty weird. Right. If we'd been filming and caught that dog ghost, we could own YouTube. Don't know for sure if it was a ghost. Nate blew air out in exasperation. It never hit the ground, and we would have seen it. You play cameraman while I stake out the bridge. Just keep filming no matter what happens. There could be money in this. Kevin hurried after him. It may not be safe. Bound to be rotten boards. Fog rolled in thicker, curling slowly like waves of steam among the trees. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Kevin hit his video button and aimed at Nate, but he held the phone near his chin to keep his vision clear. Go slow. I am. Relax. There could be all kinds of shit in here. Crap in here. Despite its normally high ceiling, the bridge was narrow and claustrophobic-inducing. Light from Nate's cell phone was limited, illuminating only a couple feet ahead. Nate took small, careful steps, panning slowly. Gargantuan cobwebs fluttered overhead. Fungus and mold had sprouted everywhere in furry patterns and spongy growths. Immediately, a rat carrying something in his mouth darted past, shadow looming monstrous against the interior wall. "Let's get out of here." Nate jerked his hand into the air. "Shh, listen." Kevin heard a slight sound. It hesitated but continued, a soft brushing, padding sound that was most definitely moving toward them. He raised the camera to his eyes, chest tight with anticipation. Down the center of the wooden bridge, a shadow moved. "Are you getting this?" "Yes, I see it. Looks like that dog again." On it came, wary steps bringing it closer to Nate's light. As the weak illumination finally played over it, they saw soft blonde ponytails. What the heck? She was no more than 3 feet tall, with an oval face smeared with grime. Her blue eyes blinked and stayed closed for a moment, as if she was making a wish. When they snapped open, they were crimson, without an iris. The camera phone tumbled from Kevin's hand as he lurched backward. He lost his footing and scrambled for the entrance. Fog was swirling in as he reached for it, forming elongated, writhing faces before flowing away. When he looked back to call for Nate, his voice locked in his throat. The toddler's mouth had distended into a cavernous maw. Swarms of worm-like apparitions, bloodlessly pale and moaning with hunger, had crawled from the opening. They twisted and squirmed, wrapped tighter around Nate, closing over his mouth before he could scream. Kevin ran, stumbling into the darkness. His jeans tore and rocks scraped the crap out of his knees. His head felt like an out-of-control kite as he vaulted into the car. For a brief moment, he saw Nate appear in the bridge entrance, eyes dripping blood. The Mustang's tires squealed and threw dirt as he turned, headlights spotlighting the Spaniel as it leapt off the bridge into the darkness.
Jeez. I'd get out of there fast. We're gonna.
She does really well with short fiction and creating a whole, you know.
Yeah,
so.
that was excellent.
Yeah.
We're gonna end this portion with you.
Yep, very well. I'm doing another woman from the past. I decided to go with someone that is peripherally in horror, but mostly is known as for literary fiction. Basically, my favorite author is William Faulkner. By far, he's the best ever. And I recommended this book, Sanctuary, by William Faulkner, to a friend of mine that I worked with. And he thought it was a pretty good book. And he said, "Oh, Phil, if you like Southern literary tales, basically, I have someone that you want to check out." And 18 years ago, yesterday was my birthday, so 18 years ago, yesterday, he came into work and he said, "Phil, for your birthday, I bought you this book." And the book is the complete short stories of Flannery O'Conner. Yeah. Flannery O'Conner is an author from the South. If people like regional literary fiction, that is considered the stuff that you would be forced to read in high school or college, Flannery O'Conner would be right there with William Faulkner.
That's where I read her.
Caldwell, of course, yes. But I wanted to show this book first because this book here, Mistress of the Dark, and it's basically all women horror writers, or stories written by women that are horror, including one tale by Flannery O'Connor's in here, The River. And all these tales, though, are classic tales from years past. So you have your Shirley Jacksons and so forth. But others that aren't as famous, similar to like C.L. Moore that I did right before. And so this would be a great place to start if you wanted to read woman horror tales from the past. Now, the story I'm going to read here from Flannery O'Conner, I'm just going to read the first page, do it real quick. Is a great tale. The friend of mine, he told me that this is the tale you got to read. And I read it 18 years ago, and he said he read it in college. It's called Good Country People. It's one of those tales that is very depressing by the end, and it's like, what did I just read? but I'm only going to read the first page or so. Here we go. Besides the neutral expression that she wore when she was alone, Mrs. Freeman had two others, forward and reverse, that she used for all her human dealings. Her forward expression was steady and driving like the advance of a heavy truck. Her eyes never swerved to the left or right, but turned as the story turned, as if they followed a yellow line down the center of it. She seldom used the other expression because it was not often necessary for her to retract a statement, but when she did, her face came to a complete stop. There was an almost imperceptible movement of her black eyes during which they seemed to be receding, and then the observer would see that Mrs. Freeman, though she might stand there as real as several grain sacks thrown on top of each other, was no longer there in spirit. As for getting anything across to her when this was the case, Mrs. Hopewell had given it up. She might talk her head off. Mrs. Freeman could never be brought to admit herself wrong on any point. She would stand there, and if she could be brought to say anything, it was something like, well, I wouldn't have said it, and I wouldn't have said it wasn't. Or letting her gaze range over the top kitchen shelf where there was an assortment of dusty bottles, she might remark, I see you ate many of them figs you put up last summer. They carried on their most important business in the kitchen at breakfast. Every morning, Mrs. Hopewell got up at 7 o'clock and lit her gas heater, and Joy was her daughter, a large blonde girl who had an artificial leg. Mrs. Hopewell thought of her as a child, though she was 32 years old and highly educated. Joy would get up while her mother was eating and lumber into the bathroom and slam the door, and before long, Mrs. Freeman would arrive at the back door. Joy would hear her mother call, come on in, and then they would talk for a while in low voices that were indistinguishable in the bathroom. By the time Joy came in, they had usually finished the weather report and were on one or the other of Mrs. Freeman's daughters. I'll just stop there, but it is basically of a domineering mother and her somewhat disabled
Sounds great.
daughter, and what happens.
I'd be interested in that.
Oh, what happens?
You'd have to read, and it's, you probably can find it in the public domain, to be honest. So,
I'm just going to announce 2 new releases, and then I'm going to read one last thing before we end the show. I just want to say that Companions in Ruin, a collection of short stories from Mark Allen Gunnels, will be released any moment now, or has been released. You can purchase that. And The Gods of H.P. Lovecraft, an anthology with H.P. Lovecraft as the major theme, was also just released. So you might want to pick those up. But I do want to finish the show with a note about the passing of a horror, I don't want to say icon, but a man that was well respected in the horror industry, and that's Mark Justice. Mark was a horror author, podcast moderator. He did the Pot of Horror podcast with Nancy Calata, and a radio host in Ashland, Kentucky. Mark was the author of Looking at the World with Glass in My Eye, the Dead Sheriff series, and co-author of the Dead Earth series with David Wilbanks. He also wrote many short stories. Mark was known for his sense of humor, his love of the horror genre, and his willingness to go out of his way to promote those involved in the horror industry. I first communicated with Mark after reading one of his short stories, and I think it was in Horror Library Volume 3. We spoke occasionally through Horror World, The Cellar, and then Facebook afterwards. And of course, I listened to the Pot of Horror whenever a new one was released. I know Nancy, his co-host, was devastated by the news. She worked very closely with him. So I'm going to speak for Nancy, as well as myself, when I say rest in peace, Mark. Your influence in the horror genre had a significant impact, and you'll be missed by many. Our condolences to your family. So, we finish up another Taco Society Presents.
That was nice.
Yep.
That was nice.
Next week, next month, we should have some guests. And,
Yes,
and,
I have my guess.
Yeah.
And you have yours.
yep,
Already?
we're
Yeah,
pretty much
we won't
ready.
announce them now, but they'll be coming. So,
Yeah.
thank you very much for watching this evening, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.